Good morning. It is great to be in Brooklyn, the county of kings, and there are plenty of queens in Brooklyn as well. Thank you to your great borough president, Eric Adams. I know that Senator Schumer was here. It is not fun to follow Senator Gillibrand after she was preaching up here this morning. And one of my dearest friends, and I am so proud that one of my first acts as Speaker was to appoint your councilwoman, my sister, Lori Cumba, to be Majority Leader of the New York City Council. I want to thank Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez, Katie Clark, the president of BAM. So I want to thank you all for being here today. And as all the speakers have said, we are here today to celebrate the life, legacy, and service of an extraordinary man. A man who believed in equality, who believed in justice, and who believed in peace. He was a man who had a dream, and it's a dream that we in this room share. And it is a dream that we in this city hold dear. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. knew that we were strongest as a society when we were united. That when we move forward together, when we lift up one another, when we work together, we can accomplish incredible things. And his unflinching resolve to achieve equality for all Americans has left a lasting impression on our nation. What he accomplished was incredible, of course. The civil rights movement shook this country to its core, forcing society to look within itself and root out systematic prejudice, inequality, and racism that festered. Sounds like we're back at one of those moments. To root out systematic prejudice, inequality, and racism, because it is still there, it is still here, and it is important to acknowledge that and to confront it. Every civil rights movement, the African American civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, every movement, the movement for women's suffrage, the LGBT civil rights movement, the movement for farm workers, those movements were not led by politicians. Those movements were led by people, by Americans, by people who said enough is enough. We are sick and tired of being sick and tired. We are sick and tired of injustice. Martin Luther King Jr. was not a politician. He was a prophet, but he was not a politician. A. Philip Randolph, not a politician. James Baldwin, not a politician. Ella Fitzgerald, not a politician. And my favorite, someone who was a constituent, used to live in my district, has been deceased many years, Bayard Rustin, one of Dr. King's closest advisors, helped plan the March on Washington, and was an openly gay man in the 1960s, was arrested and targeted and jailed and oppressed and treated with violence because of what he stood for. Bayard Rustin was not a politician. So no offense to me or the other politicians, but this moment in history, this moment we are in, this moment is not about politicians. This moment is about people. This moment is about the future of our country. And in each one of those moments, when wars were brewing, when there were fire hoses and dogs, when gay bars were being raided, when farm workers were being abused, when women were being told they should not be able to vote, politicians may have come along, but they didn't start the fight. They didn't push the fight, and they didn't finish the fight. And so Dr. King was about empowering people. Dr. King was about moving the masses. Dr. King was about giving people hope. He said, of course, and I'm sure you've heard this quote, on December 18, 1963, he said, "I say very honestly that I never intend to become adjusted to segregation and discrimination. I say that in this moment, very honestly, that I do not intend to get used to what's going on in Washington, D.C. And each one of you should not get used to what's happening in Washington, D.C. Now, do we live in scary, perilous times? Yes. Do we have a crazy, racist man in the White House? Yes, we do. He is nuts. We're just going to tell the truth today. Dr. King was about truth. But as nuts as he is, as scary as these times are, we do not have water hoses and dogs. It's about perspective. And it's about not being lulled into a false sense of security, because it may not be as outwardly violent as it was then. It is inwardly violent right now. And we cannot take our eye off the prize. Now, they throw all this stuff at us every single day, overwhelming us. We don't even want to turn the news on, because as the board president said, there's trauma involved every day, having to watch what's going on. But there is still a lot to do here in New York City. Last night, 62,000 people sleeping in a homeless shelter. 62,000. 25,000 of whom are children under the age of 16 years old. That's not the city that we want to live in. Almost a third of New Yorkers, a little less than 3 million, are living at or below the poverty line. So, of course we're going to fight back what's happening in Washington. Of course we're going to push back and be part of the resistance and be united and get to the streets, of course. But there is still stuff to do here at home in New York City. There is stuff to do here in Brooklyn, New York. And each one of us has the responsibility to be an active participant in our democracy. Now, how many people here, a little more than a year ago, when we woke up the day after the presidential election, felt sick to their stomachs? Now, most people here did. And I don't say this to shame anyone, because I felt the same way. How many people here felt like they could have done a little bit more? A little bit more. A healthy democracy requires activist participants. A healthy democracy requires individuals to get involved. Now, I don't say this, again, because some people have busy lives, have children, have work, have 2 or 3 jobs, have things to deal with. But you still have to get involved. Our country, the future of our country depends on it. The future of our children depend on it. And the hard-fought wins that Dr. King and James Baldwin and Rosa Parks and Ella Fitzgerald and Bayard Rustin, those hard-fought wins are being chipped away at right now. Chipped away at. And so it is incumbent upon us, now more than ever, to be activist participants in our democracy. To stand up, to be counted, and to really strive for a more perfect union and a more perfect New York City. I want to end with this. Don't hold it against me. I'm not from New York City. I grew up about 25 miles north of Boston. Don't hold that against me either. I grew up in a working class family. My mother was my lunch lady. My father was a Pepsi truck driver, a teamster. We grew up in public housing. And the town that I grew up in was a fairly wealthy town. There were 12 units of public housing. And when I was in high school, it may not look like it now, but I was a good athlete. I was a football player. The borough president better watch out, I'm going to tackle him on this stage. And my junior year in high school, I was elected captain of the football team. And when I was elected, it was the only time I'd ever seen my father cry. About 6 months later, I came out at school. This was in 1999. And when I came out in school, 1,500 kids, I was the only openly gay student, and I was captain of the football team. And it was 6 months after Matthew Shepard had been murdered in Wyoming, a national tragedy, tied to a fence, pistol whipped, and left to be dead. I came out, and my family, my mother's a very religious woman, was unconditionally loving. And the school was nearly unconditionally accepting. That didn't happen because I'm a fabulous, or I was a fabulous 16-year-old boy. That happened because the road was paved by the people who came before me. That happened because of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That happened because of Bayard Rustin. That happened because of Larry Kramer. That happened because of Audre Lorde. That happened because of Michael Callan. That happened because of Harvey Milk. That happened because of Tom Duane. That happened because of the people that came before me. We pay it forward. We remember how we got to where we were. And so I ask all of you to remember who came before you, who came before us, and who are we paving the road for on this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. God bless you, God bless Brooklyn, and let's make this a more just and equal United States of America. Remember those names: Bayard Rustin, MLK, Ella Fitzgerald, James Baldwin. And let's live up to their spirit and their promise for America. Thank you very much.